In my glass right now sits the oldest whiskey I have ever tasted. And while it's a bit self-indulgent to go ahead and review this, I thought it might be fun to share it with you guys, seeing as we're coming to the end of the year and we all find ourselves with something a little special in our glass. This whiskey was filled into a cask the same year Canada celebrated its 100th anniversary of becoming a sovereign nation, 1967. It's from a distillery you don't see very often with official bottlings, but occasionally you do see it from independent bottlers. Today, I'm reviewing the Gordon Macphail Archives release of Glenburgie 1967 53-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey. My name is Matt. This is Whiskey on the West Coast. The Glenburgie distillery was founded in 1829 in the Speyside near Fours. It's located in the midst of a number of other distilleries such as Benromach and Rose Isle. Glenburgie is a whiskey that is more often enjoyed as part of a blended Scotch though, rather than a single malt. There's been only a handful of official releases, I believe a 15 and an 18-year-old, but it's actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest components of the second highest selling blended Scotch in the world, Ballantine's. Now, one of the interesting things about Glenburgie is its history of experimentation with different types of stills. In 1958, two Lomond-style stills were installed and ran independent of the pot stills. The single malt made from these Lomond stills is called Glen Craig, which was named after the distillery's production manager, Willie Craig. Now, this Lomond still experiment continued on until 1981, when the Lomond stills were finally removed and replaced again with traditional pot stills. Now, the only Lomond still I have ever seen with my own eyes was the Lomond still from the Dumbarton distillery, which happily found a new life at the Bruichladdich distillery as Ugly Betty. It's actually the modified Lomond still that's used to create the Botanist gin, which I have in my cupboard upstairs for making cocktails. Really nice gin. Now, the original Glenburgie distillery was demolished, sadly, in 2004 or 2005, being replaced by a brand new modern distillery with a total of 6 stills, which kind of makes this 1967 Glenburgie, as well as all the Glenburgies prior to that time, kind of historic. And that brings us to our review of the Gordan Macphail Archives release, Glenburgie 1967 Speyside single malt Scotch whiskey. And I have to admit, I'm a bit intimidated by a whiskey that's over half a century old. But this whiskey came from Cask 3709, again, distilled 1967, bottled 2021, so 53 years old. Bottled at 48.8% ABV. It's non-chill filtered and natural color. I feel like that goes without saying. And it came from a Refill Sherry Hogshead. The cost on this bottle, which you can still buy in Alberta, Canada at multiple stores, is $4,750 Canadian. So let's investigate the nose. Wow, it's incredibly antique feeling. Like church pews and old wooden ships. I think I've made this reference before, but if you ever went to the tiny town at the Royal Victoria Museum on Vancouver Island, like there was an old wooden ship you could walk into, and this is reminiscent in smell to walking onto that ship. Just like wood lacquer. Waxy fruit peels, like orchard fruits, like so waxed apples or pears. Just like walnut and orange liqueur. And just like this amazing medley of tropical fruits. It's kind of like Five Alive, but like refined, like elevated Five Alive. As ridiculous as that sounds. Yeah, like pineapple, mango, papaya. This is the magic of refill casks. Like, if this had been a first fill cask, I feel like it would have been bludgeoned by the sherry. But this refill cask just like, it's had such a like a deft and delicate touch. It's beautiful. Gorgeous nose, like refill casks and a half century. That's the formula. Simple, guys. Just do that with every whiskey and it'll be great, right? There's no alcohol, there's no pepper, there's no heat. Just this immaculate nose. What I am noticing, because yesterday and a little bit earlier, I did try some older Glenburgies, a Glenburgie 1990 from Gordan Macphail from Refill Sherry, some ex-bourbon Glenburgies, like 26, 20-year-olds. I am noticing a common thread here, and that thread is the fruit, the tropical fruit, tropical and orchard fruit, as well as like this waxiness. Like that is a common thread, especially from those ex-bourbon Glenburgies and this refill sherry. The first fill sherry Glenburgies definitely went more along these lines of like coffee and, you know, dark fruits, leather, these sorts of things. But you can see the distillery DNA in there. It's gorgeous, this nose. Okay, to the palate, guys. Slunge, thank you for joining me. There's this bitter hazelnut and this like 85% like dark chocolate. So let's say like dark chocolate enrobed hazelnuts that maybe have been roasted just a little bit too long. That might impart that like bitterness, that like burnt edge. Also like this like beef teriyaki vibe too. Like ooh, I get that sometimes with like really sherried whiskeys. I don't believe this is like too terribly sherried, but that bitterness plus the savory edge is leading me down that road. Yeah, like beef teriyaki and grilled pineapple. Heaps of steeped black tea. Like a lovely, lovely steeped black tea. Wow. On the finish right now, there's this espresso coffee liqueur, tobacco. Oh man, this is gorgeous. I only have a small sip of this remaining, guys, so I'm gonna take my last sip. Tobacco, ginger candies, candied apricot, or like those fruit leather that you'd like pack in your lunch. I've talked about them before. There's also this like herbal element, almost like cloves. So with a bit of sweetness, maybe like a clove studded honey glazed ham. Like there's those sweet vibes plus that clove note. And the finish, as I talked about, there's that espresso coffee edge. There's also something that's like reminiscent of like menthol cigarettes and tobacco, along with the leather, so the earthiness. I will say that the palate has felt thinner than I would have hoped. And I mean, how much can I ask of a palate on a 50-plus-year-old whiskey? The nose like set up expectations. I don't know if any palate could live up to. The nose is bloody gorgeous. One of the best nosing whiskeys I've ever had in my life. The palate does not deliver on the promise. It is a fantastic palate. Do not get me wrong. I'm not like casting stones at a 53-year-old whiskey here. But I think that it was just a little bit past its prime, perhaps. And maybe that's why they pulled this whiskey and they said, this has to be bottled. My understanding with the archives release is that they pulled them because they needed to be bottled. They were at their point, and any further, there would be a reduction in the quality of the whiskeys. And when they did this, they were actually, they didn't have the bottles that they typically put these fancy, you know, ultra aged whiskeys into. Or the boxes. Those bottles or boxes or both. And so they actually bottled them in fairly plain looking Gordon Macphail bottlings, but they reduced the prices by like 50%, 50 to 60%. I've heard different stories on it. And so apparently this whiskey would cost closer to $10,000 if it was in the fancy box with the fancy bottle. Instead is 4,700 and change Canadian. So yay, less packaging is a good thing. But I can see why they were so certain it had to be bottled. I think, yeah, the palate might just be a bit past its prime. Score on this. How do you score a half-century-old whiskey? I don't know, but I'm going to take a shot. Really enjoyable, nonetheless. I'm going to give this 91 out of 100. I was leaning towards 90 and a half. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. That's a nose I will never forget on a whiskey. That was beautiful. And I do have a soft spot for Glenburgie because of those beautiful tropical and orchard fruits along with the waxiness. Yeah, gorgeous whiskey. Is older always better? I don't know. I mean, the palate on some of those 20 to 30 something Glenburgies, I think, was actually more engaging than the palate on this 1967. But that nose was something else, as you can tell, guys. Well, I hope this was entertaining. Maybe it was informative from the earlier information I talked about with the Glenburgie distillery. Nonetheless, I want to thank you all for joining me here, guys. Like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for joining me once again on Whiskey on the West Coast. 2024 is drawing to a close. I can't wait to see you guys in 2025. I hope you have something incredibly special in your glass to close out the year. As I grab another glass here, I lift it up to you. Until next time, from the West Coast, Slange.